I decided to draw these no idling signs because I wanted to make a difference in this world, and I like to make everyone environmentally aware about the problem of idling, which also leads to air pollution. Idling, if you don't know, is when a car's engine is running, the car itself is not moving. This happens when you are waiting for the red traffic light to turn green. Kids breathing Kids breathing in car exhaust is really dangerous for their health because it damages their eyes, noses, lungs, causes asthma, and even causes cancer. These posters will then be printed on metal poles and posted all across outside of schools throughout the world. You can make in your assignment too. Anyone can make a difference, so start now. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Leanna from Team 1 discussing the topic of greenhouse gases.
Okay, I managed to get on my computer. Hold up. Let me just do this. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Leanna Cortez. I am a co-team lead for Team 1, which focuses on climate action plans, climate action overall, and energy. So let me just share my screen really quick. Okay, so today I'll be talking about how the, if this would load, please. Is my screen showing?
So go ahead and keep talking, and it'll get on. Yes, it'll.
All right. So today I'll be talking about how the rollbacks on environmental regulations have impacted the climate and will impact the climate. So to begin with, I'm just going to briefly discuss the greenhouse effect and greenhouse gases. So for those of you who do not know what the greenhouse effect is, essentially viewing this picture right here, sunlight typically comes in through our atmosphere, which is represented by this blue line. And when it comes through our atmosphere, it typically reflects off of our Earth and goes back into space. However, because of these little clouds within the atmospheres, which are referred to as greenhouse gases, the atmosphere the sunlight is not going back out through the atmosphere, but is instead being trapped within the atmosphere due to these gases absorbing and trapping in heat. Therefore, the sunlight reflects from the atmosphere back onto Earth and causes a lot of warming and temperature increases. So essentially, heat cannot escape through the atmosphere, and we see an increase in temperatures on the Earth. Some of these greenhouse gases are like carbon dioxide, methane, and chlorofluorocarbons, which are also known as refrigerant coolants. They have a very varying levels of how potent they are and how prominent they are to this effect. And the sources of these vary, whether it's through animal agriculture, transportation emissions, and so forth. So this connects to what Team 1 kind of focuses on, which are climate action plans, which a climate action plan is a comprehensive and detailed framework used for measuring and planning and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So these can be implemented on the school district level, the local city level, state levels, and so forth. An example of a climate action plan kind of encompass what it may encompass includes energy, transportation and land use, urban forest and open spaces such as trees, water and waste, public involvement, green businesses, and municipal operations, which all of these kind of can be found within the 6 teams with Cleaner for Kids. Some of these climate action plans may include reduction goals, prioritized actions, and inclusions of things like community choice energy, and so forth. And some things like community choice energy are really important to climate action plans. So some things I'm going to talk about today are regulation laws and all those sort of things surrounding greenhouse gases. And I just want to take a minute to thank everyone for listening in. And this might seem very dense. However, next week, we have the honor of having Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali come on to our webinar and discuss a lot of these things I will be talking with you about, and about like regulations, laws, and a lot of rollbacks regarding the Trump administration. So one of the first ones I want to discuss with you guys today is the 2016 regulation that extends certain refrigerant management regulations to substitute things such as hydrofluorocarbons, which please do not be intimidated by how large that word is and how complicated it may sound. It's really essentially a refrigerating coolant. It's what keeps our refrigerators cool, and a lot of these fluorocarbons, whether it's carbon or hydrofluorocarbons, they're very toxic to our atmosphere and our ozone layer. They've been proven to cause disruptants in our own ozone layer and have honestly created a hole. And that is why a lot of them have been ruled out in the past. Now, it's really important that we try to substitute these refrigerant coolants with alternative substances that do not harm our ozone or atmosphere level. However, on February 26th of this year, the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, finalized a rule that relaxes the requirements that owners and operators of refrigerator equipment have leak detection and maintenance programs for these HFCs. So essentially what this means is that HFCs are going to be more frequently emitted, and which is not beneficial at all or environmentally friendly in regards to our ozone and atmosphere levels, as HFCs and CFCs are powerful greenhouse gases, which we just kind of talked about in regards to increasing temperature levels. Another thing I want to discuss with you guys about revolves around the Council on Environmental Quality and the National Environmental Quality Act. So on January 9th, 2020, the Council on Environmental Quality published a proposal to overhaul regulations governing environmental review under the National Environmental Quality Act. So the National Environmental Quality Act, or Protection Act, is it's primarily our fundamental foundation environmental law, and it is on attack right now because this proposal could limit or even eliminate consideration of climate change in several ways, as environmental reviews for fossil fuel projects would be very limited or entirely eliminated, meaning that these companies could basically do anything they want without any regards to the environment, such as polluting our waters, polluting our air, and so forth. Another thing I want to bring up to you guys is very recent, and it's regarding federal clean air standards. So the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, essentially within the Department of Transportation, during the Obama administration, there was a safe, affordable, fuel efficient vehicle rule set standards. There were a certain set of how much vehicles could produce carbon dioxide emissions, and this was set during the Obama administration to make sure that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. However, as of March 31st, these new safe vehicle rules set new standards for corporate average fuel economy and tailpipe carbon dioxide emissions for passenger vehicles and light duty trucks for model years from 2020 to 26. Essentially, this means there will be a lot more, there will be additional billion barrels of fuel consumed, about 867 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted, which is would drastically correlate and impact the greenhouse effect and greenhouse gases overall, which would increasingly increase our temperatures on Earth. So going back to the presentation, a lot of this can seem scary, and I know that this is really concerning. However, there are things you can do to stay positive and move forward and try and reverse a lot of these rollbacks. So on the local level, you can advocate for the city climate action plan. So if you can look around into your city and your school districts and see if they already have a climate action plan set in place. And if they do not, then it's best that you can try and advocate for a city climate action plan. We have a lot of resources on cleanearthforkids.org under Team 1 climate action plans. We have samples for school districts and for cities and states and so forth. So it'd be great to find like-minded people and work on with that draft that we have on our website. It's free to use completely, and kind of develop what you would like your city to implement. Another important thing to do is attend city council meetings. A lot of city council meetings are pretty much empty, and it's important to attend these meetings so that way your city legislator can understand what you are looking for and what are you seeking out. And it's really important that they know that you are there and that you are present and that you would like to do something about these things. And then another thing is to suggest additions for a climate action plan if one is already in place or if one is in a drafting state or is looking to be implemented. For example, here in Vista, I advocate for a Vista climate action plan, which is in draft form. It's a draft has been completed, but it's not been implemented yet. So it's important to attend city council meetings and so forth. And I understand during this COVID-19 situation, that a lot of these meetings are going to be canceled or postponed. However, you can still advocate through email and letter writing campaigns, which are very important. And then on the state and federal level, you can sign petitions regarding these rollbacks. This is also on our site. We have a lot of links to petitions that are already there. And it's great. You just have to sign your name, and it gives you kind of like a sample of what they were going to be sending, and you can personalize it and so forth. Or if you do not have time, that is okay as well. Another thing is just to stay informed. We have great resources as to what are going on in terms of rollbacks on our website under Team 1 Climate Change. It's a website linked to Harvard and Columbia law websites that are in regards to environmental law, policies, regulations, and rollbacks. It's really simplified. It can really give you a greater depth of understanding, and it's a great timeline and resource. Another thing is to meet with legislators and advocate for strong environmental policy. I think this is one thing that a lot of people don't understand that they can actually do. You can meet with your state and local legislators and advocate for certain policies, certain bills, and overall, voting for certain legislators that are going to protect your environmental rights is also very important during this time and age. And then my last word of advice is to don't get discouraged. Letter and email writing campaigns, petitions, lawsuits, and more are all taking place as we speak. It's important during these times that we stay positive and we work towards implementing our wants and and make sure our environmental rights and human rights are maintained during this time. And we have a bunch of resources for you guys at cleanearthforkids.org. So now I'm going to pass the baton, I guess you could say, over to Kevin, who's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about a specific greenhouse gas I mentioned earlier, which was carbon dioxide. So Kevin, there you go.
Hi, thanks, Leanna. I'm Kevin. I'm with Clean Earth for Kids, and I'm the poet. You can look at my poetry at cleanearthforkids.org. So, as you all know, we all use fossil fuels in some sort of way to power up our houses, our cars, and other things. And that really has a major impact on the environment. This is because before I get there, every living thing produces carbon dioxide as a result of respiration, especially humans. But humans produce more carbon dioxide than everything else because of our use of fossil fuels. And it leaves a very big imprint on the carbon cycle, on the environment, on the world. And there is a limit or a capacity to how much carbon dioxide can be in the atmosphere before it causes a lot of imbalances in the ocean and in other places. So I'm going to mostly be talking about how that can affect ourselves, how it can affect the ocean, how it can affect the, well, ecosystem. So too much carbon can cause algal blooms, and if you've been following the news, there have been recently a lot of algal blooms. That's when a lot of algae start growing because of the increase of carbon dioxide in water. And when that happens, they block out the sun so much so that plants underneath them cannot receive sunlight. And when that happens, those plants die. And the fish or the animals, organisms, species who need those plants to survive as will die. But there's a way we can fix that. I'll get to that later. Other things that it could impact. Okay, let's start over. It could occur in acid rain. Our emissions also, they don't just produce carbon dioxide, they produce sulfur and nitrogen. And there's several other cycles which we impact, and it causes the same kind of problems on the environment. So when there are acid rains, that rain goes down into waterways, and animals and plants, or it could go into soil. Animals and plants take that in, and they either die or they get very ill from that, and then they become weak, and the animals who eat them will get the same kind of junk that was in the water, and they'll also die. And there's a big chain reaction. And eventually that will come back to us, and we don't want that. But as I said before, we can do something about this. It's scary, but there is a solution, and I said I will get to that later. It takes a very long time for the problem to fix itself, as some carbon dioxide can stay in the air for hundreds of years. Now, carbon dioxide, while it does stay in the atmosphere for a lot of the time, it can go into the oceans, into the waters, as I said, because some marine life, some detrivores, I think, they use that carbon dioxide to, create energy for themselves to live. So that was my presentation on how greenhouse gases affect the environment. I will be talking about how air pollution affects human bodies after Judith, who will be talking about national parks. So stay tuned. I will now hand it over to Judith.
Evan, okay. I would like to show you my art that I have recently created illustrating how air pollution is toxic and bad for kids to breathe in. I am against the Trump administration rolling back protections for our national parks. In 2016, the Obama administration started the Hayes Rule, which is also part of the Clean Air Act. Its mission is to protect clean air, health, and the visibility, the state of which we can see, in our national parks. Pollution is affecting 90% of our national parks, blocking about 50 miles of what people could see because the air pollution and smog has become too thick. We must protect the Hayes Rule, the Clean Air Act, and our national parks. We must protect our national parks for future generations. National parks are for recreation and conservation, a protection of wildlife, and provides a place for people to enjoy nature. Air pollution and smog contain dangerous tiny particles of pollution that get placed deep into our lungs, making us very sick. Our federally protected public lands and national parks will be set aside from our enjoyment, recreation, and conservation. Most families have dreamed of visiting our national parks, have waited a long time to take family photos, take pictures of wildlife, take pictures of flowers, or even
We seem to have lost Judith there for a second. So Judith, thank you so much for that awesome presentation about protecting national parks and the importance of doing that. Okay, so Judith, you're back. Take it away.
Where did I land off? Where did I stop?
You talked about the importance of protecting the national parks. So about the pollution, and you are about finished. So keep on going. You're doing great.
Okay. Most families have dreamed of visiting our national parks, have waited a long time to take family photos, take pictures of wildlife, flowers, or go hiking, breathing in the fresh air. We must do everything we can together to stop this doing. Thank you to all of you who are working very hard to trying to stop toxic air pollution and for protecting our national parks, forests, wildlife, water, oceans, and air. Thank you. I will now bring it back to Kevin, who is going to talk more in depth with the topic of air pollution.
All right, thanks, Judith. All right, this time I'm going to share my screen. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the effects of air pollution on the human body. And let's start with, what is air pollution? So air pollution is the presence of a harmful substance or particles in the air, which can cause major damage to any living thing that takes it in. And it's easy for us to take it in, or for anything really, because these particles are very small. As you can see, compared to a grain of sand, which is 90 microns, particles such as from emissions or are like a lot less compared to dust, pollen, and mold as well. Here's a ruler and a model just to show how small these are. So if this represents almost 1/100th of this, imagine how small this would be. So it would be pretty much invisible to the human eye, and it would be very small enough to bypass our, protection from particles. So we were built to protect ourselves. Our bodies were built to protect ourselves from such foreign invaders. We have our nose, we have our digestive system, but it doesn't completely ensure our safety. In fact, that's how we get sick. And so when these particles come inside and they get into the bloodstream, platelets can interact with these particles and they will create a thrombus or a clot in the bloodstream, and it could be deadly because it'll go to the heart and then it'll go to the lungs, and it could cause pulmonary embolism, which, as I said before, is deadly. These particles in the body can cause very bad allergies. Our bodies try to fight off, allergens such as dust, mold, the things I said before in the other model. And that's how we get allergies. These particles can also cause respiratory and cardiac diseases, such as asthma and heart attacks, according to the American Heart Society and the American Lung Society. And then it can cause cancer, though the reason why is not very well known. This is found by the Cancer Research of the UK. So there are a lot of sources for air pollution, but it varies per state. because each state requires a different thing. So there's a different factor for each state. Industry and energy, as well as transportation, are probably big sources in general for each and every state, but there have been rollbacks and proposals to help coal and fossil fuel industries set by President Donald Trump. So far, this isn't in particular order. There's a lot of them, but I'm going to be going over these 4. So he has proposed to eliminate Obama-era restrictions that in effect require newly built coal power plants to capture carbon dioxide emissions. If you remember from my other slide or my other presentation, having more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not good. Then he also proposed a legal justification for weakening an Obama-era rule that limited mercury emissions from coal power plants. Back in the 18th and 19th century, hatters used to use mercury to build hats, and they were afflicted with Mad Hatter syndrome or disease, or in other words, erethism. It was mercury poisoning. We do not want more mercury in the air, which caused the hatters from the 19th and 18th century to go bonkers. President Trump also proposed a rule exempting certain types of power plants from parts of an EPA rule limiting toxic discharge from power plants into public waterways. And this is bad because it causes certain public rivers, waterways to be unusable. You won't be able to go in them. Animals won't be able to drink water from them, and that's bad. And eventually that water will end up in our drinking water, which we don't want. And then he proposed to extend the lifespan of unlined coal ash holding areas. So coal ash is made out of heavy metals such as arsenic, lead, and mercury. And these holding areas they don't really do their job very well, especially when it rains and some of the coal ash leaks and it goes into groundwater, which will eventually end up in our drinking water. So now I'm going to talk about why some communities are more polluted than others. It's because we're a big state and we have a lot of people in each community, and we have a lot of highways because of that, because we need to get places. But that's fine. There are some things that we can do. We can drive less, do it whenever you really need it. You can turn off your engine, so don't idle. You could take some alternatives to driving, like taking a train to work, biking, or hiking if you're looking for exercise and something fun to do. You can also carpool. Woohoo, carpool. You can also start a climate action plan in your school district, your city, your state, all that. You can eliminate pesticides for healthy soil. So instead of having, runoff, that could be really bad for our waterways and that could affect our ecosystem. We could have, healthy soil and that doesn't leak anything into the water. We can do it. So there are things we can do to get people to learn about all this information. I took a long time, but you don't have to do a slideshow. You don't have to do a presentation. You can write a song. You can sing it. You can write a poem like I do. You can make signs. You can even plant trees. So that being said, I'm going to now hand it over to Denise, who is going to talk about water.
Janice, so great job, you guys are so amazing. What a fantastic youth board. They absolutely have done so much important work, and continuing to meet with our experts, our consultants, and we're so excited about our panelist session / show next week and all of the great things that we have. As Janice mentioned before, when you guys write questions in the chat box, that helps them a lot to prepare to answer questions for next week. And also we'll be donating to a charity, so it's 10 cents per question in the chat box that you have for the panelists. And then if your question is read aloud next Thursday or the following Thursdays, then $1 will go to the charity of your choice. So, okay, great. All right. Thank you so much for all of this great information. And again, thank you so much for the people attending this call. We have our board members, John Bator for Information Security Specialist, who helps us to make sure our website is secure, and Jay Kloppenstein, who is an excellent teacher and has been for decades, all things environmental, Cal RTA. I could go on and on. Dr. Amelie Catalan, who is our water expert. And we have also on the call Debbie Matthews of NAACP, who works with youth, our very good friend Georgiana, and many others. So thank you guys so much for being on this call and for supporting our youth. So we're excited to hear from Janice about water. So Janice. We can't hear you yet. There you go.
I'm Janice, and can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm coordinator for Team 4 and also on the youth board. And packing oil spills, pipeline, clean water rule, and also the Streams Act. The Clean Water Act was created in 1972 by President Nixon. This act is a national commitment to protect our nation's water, and it regulates the discharges of pollutants as well as regulates the quality standards of surface water in the US. One of the main reasons this act was created
Janice, we lost you there. Janice, we lost you for a second. I don't know if it's us or if it's you, but we're not able to hear some of your very important, all of your very important information. So what we're going to do is, real quick, while Janice checks her equipment, we're going to just look at our 6 teams and talk about that for a second. So as Leanna and Kevin talked about with Team 1, we've got our climate action plans, and we'd like all cities, school districts, and everyone to work on our climate action plans. Team 2, helping us plant trees, our parks, forests, wildlife, as Judith shared, protecting our national parks from all that toxic pollution and smog. So important, as Judith said, people can wait a lifetime saving their money to be able to go and visit a national park. And it's just a shame that 50 miles of visibility in 90% of our parks is a problem. So, okay, and then Team 3, as Kevin and Judith shared, we're working to protect clean air and reduce air pollution. And then Team 4, Janice's team, Water is Life. Last week, Janice talked about Standing Rock and how important it is for people to understand the struggles there. trying to protect their water from a pipeline. Team 5, Darren will share in a little bit about stopping toxic pesticides and chemicals. And Team 6, we won't hear from tonight. This is about plastics, great ways to reduce plastics and all zero waste. So, all right, so we're going to give Janice a try again. So, Janice, can you start from the beginning of your presentation? And if you'd like to just speak directly into the camera without sharing your screen, we can put up some pictures for you. Or if you'd like to try sharing it, we're happy with that as well. So go ahead and go, Janice. We're excited to learn. You've done so much important work, and we're so excited to hear from you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Janice, and I'm on the Cleaner for Kids Youth Board. I'm also the coordinator for Team 4. Team 4 is protecting our waters from offshore drilling, fracking, oil spills, and pipeline dangers, while also protecting the water we drink. So to begin with, the Clean Water Act was created in 1972 by President Nixon. This act is a national commitment to protect our nation's waters. It regulates discharges of pollutants, as well as regulates the quality standards of surface water in the U.S. One of the main reasons this act was created was because of the fire on the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio, where the river itself caught on fire because of firms discharging oil slick, solvents, and other industrial products into the river, causing it to be very muddy. Between 1868 to 1952, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire 9 times. Since then, the Clean Water Act has greatly decreased U.S. water pollution, and from 1972 to 2001, rivers had become 12% safer for fishing. Another main reason is the Santa Barbara oil spill that occurred in January and February of 1969 in the Santa Barbara Channel, near the city of Santa Barbara in Southern California. It was the largest oil spill in the United States water at that time, and now is ranked as the 3rd largest oil spill in the U.S. However, it still remains the largest oil spill to have occurred in the waters off of California. The Clean Water Rule was created in 2015 by the Obama administration to ensure that waters protected under the Clean Water Act were precisely defined, more predictably determined, and easier for businesses and industries to understand. The Clean Water Rule defines, changes, and clarifies many things that could be used as loopholes in the Clean Water Act. Firstly, the Clean Water Rule clearly defines and protects tributaries that impact the health of downstream waters. So what it's defining is that unlike in the Clean Water Act, where it protects navigable waterways and their tributaries, the Clean Water Rule says that a tributary must show physical features of flowing water. For example, a bed, bank, or ordinary high water mark, in order to warrant its protection. The Clean Water Rule provides protection for headwaters that have these features because science has shown that they can have significant connections to downstream waters. Secondly, the Clean Water Rule also provides certainty in how far safeguards extend to nearby waters. The rule protects waters that are next to rivers and lakes and their tributaries because science shows that they heavily impact downstream waters. The rule set boundaries on covering nearby waters for the first time that are physical and measurable. Thirdly, the Clean Water Rule also protects the nation's regional water treasures. Science shows that specific water features can function like a system and impact the health of the downstream waters. So the rule protects prairie potholes, Carolina and Delmarva Bays, Pocosins, western vernal pools in California, and Texas coastal prairie wetlands when they impact downstream waters. Fourthly, the Clean Water Rule focuses on streams, not ditches. The rule limits protection in ditches that are constructed out of streams or functions like streams and carry pollution downstream. So ditches that are not constructed in streams and that flow only with rain when it rains are not covered. Fifthly, the Clean Water Rule also maintains the status of waters within municipal separate storm sewer systems, meaning that the rule does not change how these waters are treated and encourages the use of green infrastructure. Finally, the Clean Water Rule reduces the use of case-specific analysis of these waters. Previously, almost any water could be put through a lengthy case-specific analysis, even if it would not be subject to the Clean Water Act. The rule significantly limits the use of case-specific analysis by creating clarity and certainty on protecting waters and limiting the number of similarly situated water features. All in all, the Clean Water Rule helps get swimmable, fishable, and drinkable water throughout the country. The Stream Act, also known as the Stream Protection Rule, covered waterways near surface coal mining operations in order to avoid pollution of rivers and streams, and also called for restoration of streams that had been damaged by dangerous heavy metals like mercury or arsenic. Now I will be talking about rollbacks. Firstly, to understand what a rollback is, the definition is a reduction, disease, or cut. For these rollbacks, the definition would be just reduction or cut. The first rollback of four dealing with water is decreasing the extent of the pollution connections for certain tributaries and wetlands that were regulated under the Clean Water Act by the Obama administration, passed by the EPA and the Army. An immediate effect of the Clean Water Repeal is that polluters will no longer need a permit to discharge potentially harmful substances into many streams and wetlands. But the measure, which is expected to take effect in the matter of weeks, has implications far beyond the pollution that will now be allowed to flow freely into waterways. Overall, when we don't have regulations in place and we let farmers or industries dump things into the oceans, any streams, wetlands, and more, then there can become a dead zone, which, if you don't know, is a place where no life exists, that kills the animals in the water and is toxic for anyone to breathe in. The second rollback that they've revoked is a rule that prevented coal companies from dumping mining debris into local streams passed by Congress. Robert E. Murray, the Murray Energy Company's chief executive, said this unlawful and destructive rule is nothing but a thinly veiled attempt to destroy our nation's underground coal mines and put our nation's coal miners out of work. The third rollback was the withdrawal of a proposed rule aimed at reducing pollutants, including air pollution, at sewage treatment plants passed by the EPA. The fourth and last rollback was a withdrawal of a proposed rule requiring groundwater protections for certain uranium mines passed by the EPA. These rollbacks are simply the ones already completed, and there are many more still in the process or being considered. The current administration is systematically dismantling the rules and laws that protect our water. Most of the important protections being rolled back were put in place during the Obama administration to address the industrial pollutions threatening the health of our nation's waters. These rollbacks are being done using executive orders along with directions to the EPA, Interior Department, Army Corps of Engineers, and many more to change their rules. The largest benefactor of these changes is the fossil fuel industry, along with mining companies and large agricultural groups. They will be able to dump toxic chemicals and waste directly into waterways with little to no oversight, monitoring, or penalties. This is a direct threat to the health and well-being of all of us, but especially to low-income and minority groups who are more likely to be exposed to harmful toxins such as lead, heavy metals, and agricultural pesticides. We welcome people to help us stop the rollbacks in process, as well as possible occurring rollbacks. You can join us and other organizations, write letters, or call your congressperson, and most of all, stay informed. We invite you to learn with us. We will invite experts, consultants, and students to work together and do everything we can to protect our water, our air, and our land for our future. Please join us at cleanearthforkids.org. We all need to learn as much as we can to protect our water. Right now, unfortunately, the Trump administration is trying to undo or roll back 95 protections for our water, air, land, and wildlife. This hurts our health and our future. Also, by chipping away at these important protections, the Trump administration is now trying to roll back the foundation environmental law of our country called NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. Let's learn all we can together for a better future. Thank you for the support, and thank you for listening to my presentation. Also, I want to thank Dr. Emily Kathleen, our water expert and consultant, and also thank our other consultants, experts, supporters, volunteers, and my fellow youth board members. And remember, we all need to protect our water and for our generation and future generations.
Thank you so much,
I now bring this presentation to Darren.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Janice. My name is Darren. I'm the leader of Team 5, which talks about pesticides and other toxic chemicals. So I'm going to be talking about how the rollbacks affect that in particular. So I have a presentation. Hopefully it'll show up. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about 3 different aspects of environmental policy that have been either rolled back or prevented from happening. The first 2 titles from my slides, heads up, were taken from a New York Times article. If you want to know the article, I can link it in the chat. And I'm sure other people have talked about it as well. So the first thing that the Trump administration has done is overturned a ban on the use of lead ammunition and fishing tackle on federal lands. And this was done by Ryan Zink on his first day as U.S. Interior Secretary after being appointed by Trump. And the Department of the Interior basically is in charge of like the national parks, Fish and Wildlife Services, all that. So it's kind of like the leadership. So he's like very powerful, obviously, because he got to do that. So I'm gonna be talking about how lead affects wildlife specifically, since this is hunting, and so that would probably be a higher exposure for wildlife than the people who would be using the lead. So one thing to note is that lead can last decades in soil or fresh water without breaking down. And so indirect exposure, like fish or worms, can digest the lead decades after it's left there. So even if we re-implemented this legislation, then it would still have an impact for decades to come. One of the ways to expose animals to lead directly is when birds mistake lead objects for seed or grit while foraging for food on the ground. So yeah. One thing also to know is that the ingestion of lead fishing gear accounts for up to 50% of adult common loon mortality, where recreational fishing occurs in locations highly populated by common loons. So fishing tackle is also very impactful on the populations of these animals. So the reason that lead is toxic is because stomach acid dissolves lead into lead salts, and that's what's basically toxic, and that's what's absorbed into the bloodstream. Lead salts can substitute for several metal ions and other compounds that are essential for the body, and this can lead to a slew of symptoms: cell damage, damage to neurological areas, organs, damage to the central nervous system, so on and so forth. Going back to birds, some symptoms of birds are lethargy, weakness, muscle wasting, blindness, head tremors, decreased gastrointestinal tract, motility, paralysis and seizures, and acute lead poisoning can eventually damage organs so much as to create organ failure, which obviously causes death. And like I've said before, it affects the mortality rate of wildlife, which puts the ecosystem off balance. And when the ecosystem is off balance, it damages the environment around them because there's a lot of levels on the food chain. So if one level is decreased, then it will affect their predators, and it will also affect their prey, which will expand in number, and then their predators will decrease in number, and it just puts everything off balance. Also, because this is being encouraged in public lands, it may also lead to the encouragement of production of lead bullets and tackle, which are toxic to nearly all organisms. So basically, people who will be buying it, people who will be making it, will also be affected by this legislation. The one important thing to know, if you don't remember anything else about lead, is that there's no safe level of lead. And since this will be in our public lands for years to come, even the smallest trace that's left decades after is still going to have a big impact. Okay, so the second thing Trump administration has done is rejected a proposed ban on chlorpyrifos. This was done by Andrew R. Wheeler, the administrator of the EPA, as of November 2018. This was done more recently than November 2018, but that was when he was appointed. So the dangers of chlorpyrifos, the way that humans are exposed to chlorpyrifos is through contaminated water, contact with plants treated with pesticide containing chlorpyrifos, stuff like that. Once it enters the body, it is broken down to a toxin, which is called chlorpyrifos, and that's what is toxic. Just how lead is converted into lead salt, chlorpyrifos is converted into chlorpyrifos. One thing to note is that a CDC study showed that children carry almost twice the levels of chlorpyrifos as adults. Chronic exposure levels were 4.6 times the acceptable level for children, 3.0 times the acceptable level for youth. And youth is defined as 12 to 19 and children is 6 to 11. So it's still, it's having a very profound effect on children, especially since it interferes with development. So because they're rejecting this, that means that it will affect the children who grow up with these delayed development issues. So chlorpyrifos is an inhibitor of enzymes. I'm not going to pronounce that enzyme, but you can see it there, which prevents them from controlling acetylcholine, which leads to damage to neurological function, which then leads to damage to the central nervous system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, etc. Because the brain controls everything. So once the brain is affected, a lot of other things are affected. So with acute toxicity, you can get exposure to it in various different ways. If you inhale it, it affects your nose, bloody runny nose, coughing, respiratory issues, wheezing, chest discomfort. If it's absorbed through the skin, it can lead to sweating and involuntary muscle contractions. Eye contact can lead to pain and bleeding in the eyes, pupil constriction. And then eventually, if it makes its way to the central nervous system, it can lead to loss of reflexes, weakness, fatigue, twitching, tremors, and paralysis, which is nothing to mess with. And then with chronic toxicity, and chronic is basically repeated or prolonged exposure to chlorpyrifos, the main thing is neurological damage. So it's correlated with decreased IQ, speech difficulties, increased risk for autism and ADHD. A UC Berkeley study found that the group exposed to the highest levels of organophosphate, which is the category of pesticide that chlorpyrifos falls under, during pregnancy was associated with a 7-point drop in IQ scores in 7-year-olds. A Columbia University study found that 3-year-old children with higher prenatal exposures to chlorpyrifos were more likely to experience delays in development, attention problems, ADHD problems, and pervasive developmental disorder problems. And then finally, a UC Davis study
found that mothers who live within a mile of fields where chlorpyrifos and other organophosphate pesticides were applied had a 60% higher chance of having children with autism spectrum disorder. And so it affects your intelligence cognitive ability. It also impairs memory and concentration, like the study has reflected. It can also lead to mood disorders like severe depression, causing nightmares, interfering with their sleep. Many of these human effects extend to wildlife because of pesticide drift. It's been found in like Alaska and Canada and places where humans were not using chlorpyrifos at all. It's just made its way there gradually. And the last thing I'm going to be talking about is the Trump administration has reported no plans to ban asbestos. So basically this is related to the Toxic Substance Control Act, and I thought this quote pretty much summed it up. The new Toxic Substances Control Act requires EPA to consider all uses of a chemical when evaluating it for safety. Paradoxically, though, the EPA is ignoring key exposures to asbestos in its safety assessment, likely in violation of the law. This was written by Melanie Benish in an article for the Environmental Working Group. So basically, the aspects of asbestos that are being excluded are legacy uses, which means the asbestos lingering in schools, homes, and other building materials across the country. And this poses the biggest exposure risk for most Americans, since most Americans are not working in places where they're exposed to asbestos directly. It's just they'll come into contact with an older house and they don't know, or something like that. The EPA has also significantly narrowed the kinds of asbestos included in its definition of asbestos for their research. And in general, to comment on the TSCA, the EPA has in most cases decided to exclude from its calculations any potential exposure caused by the substance's presence in the air, ground, or water. And that was a quote by the New York Times, and it was linked to a 1,500-page document. So I was not able to check if asbestos is applied to this exclusion of air, ground, or water, but I'm assuming it is, or if it isn't, then one of the other 10 or more of these chemicals that were included in this act are definitely not going to be assessed for their presence in those areas. Okay. So the exposure to asbestos, like I said, old houses, construction material, tiles, roofing materials, insulation, texture, paint, paper, etc. And the main way you're exposed to asbestos is inhalation, and the fibers work your way into the lungs so that all of the symptoms of coming into contact with asbestos are related to the lungs or the chest cavity. So there's two things that can happen. You can get a chronic lung disease or you can get cancer, and neither of those are good. So the first one is asbestosis, which is scarring in the lungs caused by breathing asbestos fibers, as the name suggests. This leads to a plethora of symptoms like difficulty breathing, persistent dry cough, chest tightness or pain, basically respiratory issues. Then there's pleural disease, which causes changes in the membrane surrounding the lungs and the chest cavity. And pleura means chest cavity. So there are different changes that can happen to the membrane. One is thickening of the membrane, either overall or in isolated areas, fluid buildup around the lungs, localized deposits of collagen. And then there's pleural fibrosis, which is the thickening and stiffening of the pleura, and that it means a thin, transparent, two-layered membrane that covers the lungs. And this can lead to a folded lung, which is basically what it sounds like. An area of pleural fibrosis rolls into the lung, making a portion of the lung airless, which doesn't sound great. Then there's two different types of cancer you can develop from asbestos. The first one is mesothelioma, which is the cancer of the membrane in the lungs and the chest cavity. Some of the first symptoms that you would have are fatigue, shortness of breath, muscle weakness, wheezing or coughing. Secondly is lung cancer, which I'm sure we all know, but it's a tumor that invades and blocks the lungs' air passages. Again, I couldn't find a better way to say this, but that's a quote from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And again, the first symptoms of this were coughing up blood, chest pain, weight loss, shortness of breath, and bone pain. And while those are all bad, the main issue is that both are very likely to be fatal. The lung cancer 5-year survival rate is 18.6%. More than half of people with lung cancer die within 1 year of being diagnosed. The 5-year relative survival rate is 10% for mesothelioma, so that's even worse. And if you're wondering, the 5-year relative survival rate, that describes the percentage of patients with the disease alive 5 years after the disease is diagnosed. And then they compare that to the percentage of general population of the corresponding sex and age alive after 5 years. So compared to normal people of their sex and age, their survival rate is 10%. So, and with lung cancer, it's 18.6%. So it's a very grave way to suffer from asbestos exposure. I'm gonna go through my sources, and I'm not gonna read them all, but if you have any questions about where things are from, I can definitely link this somehow, a list of my sources. And then if you have any other questions, I would be willing to answer them. Although I'm not an expert, so I'm not sure if I would be able to answer all of your questions.
So what we'll do is, great job, Darren. Thank you so much. And that's why we're working so very hard to stop these rollbacks, and because we can see our lives depend on it. And now with COVID-19 and the seriousness of how people's lungs are being damaged, we cannot have these rollbacks. We cannot have them. So we're very disappointed by the actions of the Trump administration. On our website, on our homepage, cleanairforkids.org, it will show the 95 rollbacks in the New York Times article, and then it also has the link to Harvard and Columbia tracker of those rollbacks. So what we've talked about tonight is very serious, and so I really am so very proud of the Youth Board for being able to take this on, and for our students and friends listening. We've got to band together and do all that we can. And you guys, I'm just so very proud of you. So I have a couple of announcements before Darren closes. And again, if you'd like to write your questions in the chat box, the way we're going to be doing this is we'll have our guest experts answering these questions next week and every Thursday. Next week we'll be on a little earlier. We'll start at 5:30 because we have a lot of people on the East Coast who are very interested in what we're doing. And as was mentioned at the beginning, we'll have Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, who has worked at the EPA for 24 years. He's with Hip Hop Caucus, NWF, and the important work that he's done for so long, supporting youth and students. So we're excited about that. And with our contests, like Janice and Judith talked about, and Kevin, students can do, with our K-12 contests, they can make up their songs, raps, video clips, presentations, and do all of these things to bring awareness to what we need to do to protect our clean air and water. And as you saw Judith's beautiful artwork, a sign can make all the difference. And so we're so excited that CARB, who, thank you to Rebecca, our person helping us from California Air Resources Board, and Trish Johnson. We're so happy to be a recipient of monies that will be putting up no idling signs to remind people to turn off their car engines. So Judith's artwork will be, and others, the kids and people who enter those are for our K-12 contest there. So making no idling signs, those signs will be printed on metal and then placed outside of schools, because we want to reduce toxic air pollution and protect our lungs. 1 minute of idling has more carbon monoxide than 3 packs of cigarettes, and 1 gallon of gas burned can put up to 20 pounds of carbon, a greenhouse gas that Kevin was talking about with his presentation, and Leanna as well, into the atmosphere. So we're excited to take these solutions. And again, students can join us and get community service hours by taking notes on our presentations. They can draw comics, and there's so much more. It's on our website. But so we have Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali next week, and then we have California Congressman Mike Levin joining us on the 16th as one of our special guests. Of course, we'll be hearing from our water expert, Dr. Amélie Catalan, our esteemed board member, Jay Kloppenstein, and excited to work with NAACP, Debbie Matthews, and all of you. So excited. So I'll have Darren say goodbye after I have also to give a shout out to all the important work that's going on at Surfrider Foundation. Thank you so much. And the Sierra Club and our beloved Echo Rotary Group led by Dr. Amélie Catalan and Niels. And thank you so much for all of the fantastic friendship and support that we've received. We care deeply about these issues. As you know, I was poisoned by pesticides by a helicopter near my home, and we started Cleaners for Kids. And here we are. So thank you again so much. We're making a lot of progress. We helped Oceanside get the first climate action plan with 75% renewable energy, working with other cities, as Leanna mentioned, Vista. We are stopping pesticides in the whole county of San Diego, so that's helping over 3 million people. Also in Oceanside, the first IPM. So we're working here locally and in other states and around the world. We're so proud to have our friends from Scotland, our young friends, I should say, our youth, entering the contest, making that wonderful mural to protect the kelp. So we're excited and so glad to be here with you. So, all right, so I would love to have Darren close us out. And then if you guys can turn on your screens, panelists, that's great, and wave goodbye. And if not, then that's okay too. You might be started to work on your homework. Not sure. There you go. Hello, Leanna. And Darren's on. There's Judith. Yes, our artist. Fabulous. And I know, yes. Okay, perfect. So, and others, like Kevin, I can't see if you're on yet, and Janice, but thank you. You guys are so incredible. And so absolutely, we're just so proud. If I think about it, I'll just cry. So thank you so much from Dawn and myself, Jay and Amélie and all of us. So, okay, Darren, close us out, please.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. Thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for everyone on our youth board for putting so much effort into this, for educating everyone. And thank you for our participants for listening in to what we had to say. We covered a lot today. We talked about how the rollbacks affected energy, public lands, air pollution, our water, and pesticides, human health. So again, if you are interested in helping, or if you have any questions or want to know more about what's happening, you can always go to our website, cleanearthforkids.org. So yeah, and if you have any questions, we'll address them next time. Be sure to tune in.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night. We look forward to reading your questions. Okay, thanks again. We'll go ahead and end the meeting. Okay, bye. Love you guys. Love you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, we need to save the chat.
I'm doing that right now.
Yeah. So we're going to be saving the chat right there. So we have that. Fantastic. And thank you.